Morning, folks. It's Brian. I've got an RQG review posting this morning. Weapons and equipment review number, I think we're on 6. Weapons is the chapter. So this is probably going to be a long one because I've got lots of opinion on weapons. Okay. Oh, let's start off with things. Categories. And I talked about how if you have skill in a weapon in a category, that you can use all other weapons in that category with half your skill. Easy mechanic, applicable. I think it's a good idea. I often have in the past even considered using a different weapon, picking up somebody else's broadsword, because every weapon is balanced different. You gotta get used to it, but I give them back to full percentage once they get to it, once they're familiar with it, right? Okay. Strength and dexterity. Okay, there are requirements for strength and dexterity for the different weapons. Does it come up much? Not really. It's usually, I've found in my game, um, trying to use a composite bow if you don't have a 13 strength, or trying to use a battle axe one-handed when you don't have a 13 strength kind of thing. But you can make up for dexterity with strength, but you can't make up for strength with dexterity. It does make some sense to me. And then if both are below the requirements, all your attacks and parries, since they're using the same skill, are at half. Okay, crushing, cut and thrust, hand to hand, impaling and slashing types of weapons. I like that I like those categories. That works for me. Then we get into the actual weapons. There's a whole page of melee weapons, axes, hammers, maces, clubs, flexible weapons, and pole weapons all on one page. Nice, cool pictures. Although the troll maul, in RQ3, they had a troll maul, took a 17 strength. This is the maul that did the 2d8 damage. Whereas here, the maul that does 2d8 damage, where'd it go? It's just a maul. It takes a strength of 11. And if you look at the picture of the troll made maul with a huge head, you gotta wonder, maybe a troll maul should be made for a troll and should do more damage. That's something I'll work on. They mention here underneath the wood axe, because I went through my thing and I marked on here, this is primarily a tool. It can't be used as a weapon, right? I also mark on here certain weapons that can be used like a pike, planted for a charge. I also mark things like, this has got to be an exotic weapon, right? This has got to be an exotic weapon, like a lasso. I don't see anybody Dragon Pass using a lasso. Racelanders, maybe. I don't know. And pole axes, an actual pole axe, like the medieval guys. Yeah, I think it's kind of exotic as well. But the wood axe, right? Chopping wood, whack, whack, whack. Unsuitable for parrying edged weapons. Why? It's a half of wood. A battle axe two-handed has a half of wood. A quarterstaff is a half of wood. A spear is a half of wood. Do any of these other things not suitable for parrying edged weapons? No. And it's not like a wood axe's handle is like wimpy. Those things are hefty. Yes, don't agree. I'm not sure what that was for. Next page, more melee weapons, right? Spears, swords, unarmed attacks. Again, a couple things I marked for pike. A couple things I marked as exotic, like armored gloves, necessity, that kind of thing. Yeah, it just doesn't fit my understanding of Glorantha. Maybe it's West Glorantha. One thing that does bother me, though, I can understand them doing this, is the broadsword. They call it a cut and thrust. My broadswords are slashing weapons. I don't really see a lot of thrusting with a broadsword, but again, uh, I'm just not sure. And it really makes you wonder. You've got to be really, really weak if you're going to be using a short sword. Short sword doesn't take any strength. Broadsword only takes, 9? So most people be using a broadsword, but there's a lot of short sword weapon um, training and requirements, if you will. Now, admittedly, I have down here. It's from the old Cults of Prax and Cults of Chaos. I've got the old one, the combined one. That there are cults in there, specifically the Cults of Chaos, evil guys, where they have training in short sword. So what's the benefit of a short sword versus a broadsword? Same skill base. Short sword takes less strength, takes less dexterity, which is minimal anyway, does less damage, has the same hit points, same encumbrance. Short sword has a higher strike rank and is a cut and thrust. For me, that's the kind of difference. A short sword is a cut and thrust weapon, whereas a broadsword is a hacking weapon. Man, say la vie, right? Okay. They have a little box, call out box here on entangling, because you got entanglers like whips and what else do they have here? And the flexible stuff. All kinds of whips, nets, lasso, that kind of stuff, right? Where with a special success, you can hit a number of locations, a D3 -1, with at least one. On a critical, you double the number of locations that are entangled, right? And when someone is entangled, the attacker, the entangler, right, can attempt to pull the target prone, pull the target prone with a strength plus size versus strength plus size. Good to go. They can attempt to limit the target's ability to attack and or defend if there's an arm that's entangled. On the entangler strike rank, if you're successful, successful at rolling double the entangling weapon skill. So using your whip, you've already entangled an arm. On your strike rank, if you roll double your normal skill, the target's skill with that arm to attack or defend is then halved. Okay, that makes sense? Took a while to get through it all, but that's what it is. And of course, if they're mounted, you can pull and drag them. Okay. A thrown entangling weapon can only knock the target down. So you can't do all these other things. In order for the target to stay upright, they have to make a Dex ×5 roll. If the attack with a thrown weapon is a critical, though, you only have a Dex ×1. What about a special? Dex ×2? Dex ×3? If you are entangled, you can attempt to free yourself with a Dex ×5 roll or a Dex ×1 if both arms are immobilized. I'm assuming then they get the D3 -1 locations as well. If they have a cutting weapon in hand or if a sheath, takes 5 strike ranks. They specifically say this, taking 5 strike ranks if sheathed. This is mechanically important concepts that are explained. They can attempt to cut the entangling weapon at half of their skill chance. They do not get a damage bonus, but all of the damage then applied to the hit points of the weapon. Or you can attempt to break it with a strength ×1 roll. Next page. Huge block on net fighting, almost the entire page. A combat net can be used as a lash, doing damage, or to ensnare an opponent. It says the fighters normally carry it in their left hand, and it can therefore be used as a shield. Interesting. There's a new target location chart. So a successful attack that is not parried allows the attacker to roll on this special table, which 1 through 10 is the legs are caught. 11, 12, arms are caught, but the legs and head are free. 13 is the right arm and head. 13 and 15. 16, 18 is the left arm and head. And 9, 20 is just the head, so your vision is obscured, and so your attack and parries are half. Okay, I'll buy that. Okay, the areas caught must be freed by ripping, cutting, or burning, and we'll talk about that in a minute. If there's no tension on the net, the victim can simply unwind the net themselves. A roll equal to or less than the victim's dex, or a dex times 1, succeeds at this, and it can be attempted once per melee round on the victim's dex strike rank. Again, mechanical application called out. And victims whose arms are pinned cannot unwind without help. So it sounds like this. If there's no tension on the net, you can simply unwind yourself with dex times 1 rolls. That doesn't sound so simple to me. Okay. Defending against a net. If you parry a net with your shield, the shield arm is immobilized. You need to make a dex roll, dex times 1 roll. If it's a weapon that's used to parry the net and it is caught, the dex times 5, and then the weapon arm is immobilized as well unless they let go of the weapon. Okay. If you're dropping a net on a victim from above, it cannot be parried, but it can be dodged. Once you are ensnared, you have 3 options we mentioned earlier: ripping, cutting, and burning. So to rip a net is strength versus strength. It takes 2 successful rolls, though, to actually make it big enough to get out. And you can only do that if not trussed up. I'm not sure exactly what trussed up means. Which location does that qualify for? Okay, cutting a net open. Again, if you got a weapon handy or you draw it out, right? Now it says here that you only do the damage, no matter what kind of weapon edged weapon you have. You only do the damage of a dagger because I guess the kind of amount of motion that you can do. Yeah, limited mobility. The damage bonuses and blade sharp though do apply to this damage. And in order to completely cut yourself out, you have to destroy all of the net's hit points. Okay, burning a net. Nets take full damage from torch or fire blade, and unless it's excessively dry, it won't actually catch fire. But the flaming object must be held against the net to do the damage. And then, of course, you can combine things. You can burn and cut at the same time. Okay. Flexible weapons. And in most of these, they talk about it entangles on special success, entangles on special success, entangles on special success. You can grapple with a whip, or you can inflict damage. Entangles with special success. Well, that was a rope dart. Same thing with whip though. Entangle or inflict damage. Entangles on special success. Pole weapons. A note here on the pole lasso. Does no actual damage, but immobilizes the caught hit location with the same strength of the user, like the grapple. Good to go. A pole hook on a special success target is entangled. Spears. Note here on pikes, because it's a two-handed weapon, that the Sundown Templars are actually trained how to do two-handed pike and shield. Swords and daggers. The Aldriami do resort to blades when they must, wielding swords and daggers made from copper, hardened sap, or petrified wood. Cool. Dragonutes make their swords from ancient bones, dragon bone, or of wood and chipped obsidian. The wood and chipped obsidian we've seen a lot in pictures, and it's kind of the default description. But this ancient bones and dragon bone is kind of new, I think. They got a call out box here on napping. Not taking a sleep, but making flint weapons, right? Because dragon newts are they like this kind of stuff. Their amazing craftsmanship is the way they do things. So their stuff's never sold or given away. Talking about how an arrowhead can be crafted in an hour, spearhead in 3, and a full dagger takes a whole day's work. Napped weapons have half the hit points of equivalent bronze weapon, and any damage that a napped weapon takes through use reduces the total damage you can deal by an equal number of points. So if you damage a napped dagger for 2 points of damage, it's going to inflict 2 points of damage. It's going to inflict 2 points less damage. That doesn't sound right, but you know what I mean. It can be repaired. Unless it's completely broken, goes to 0 hit points. And they make a comment about, this whole damage thing. For game purposes, only weapons made entirely through napping are treated that way, right? Taking damage and doing less damage. So spears, javelins, arrows all have napped points are treated normally. And that's most of what you got. We're talking about a nap, an actual dagger kind of thing. Well, there's a scenario they've got an obsidian sword, but it's special, so it probably doesn't follow those rules either. Okay, broadsword, they say it's deadly and thrusting. I tend to disagree with that, but that's just me. Parrying dagger. Wow. Getting back to the exotic weapons and things that feel out of place in time, right? A parrying dagger. Those were developed during the Renaissance when you have when there's a lot of rapier finding basket heel in the hand, dagger with catching things and stuff, right? So you get that blade, hide it, get it in the way, that kind of stuff. I just don't see that here, but we do have rapiers, right? Cut and thrust weapons. So it's there. His Rolling knife is concealable. None of the other ones apparently are, but the Rolling knife is. I meant to double check. Does the Rolling knife do different damage? Daggers, daggers, daggers. Rolling knife, yeah, does D3 plus 1. A regular knife does a D6. A dagger does a D4 plus 2. So there's some variation there. So very thin. Oh, it talks about being, it's like a stiletto. They hide it in the hairstyle and that kind of thing, right? Use it as a hairpin. No more extra comments here. Missile weapons. Okay. A weapon is thrown or uses physical force. That's not right. Muscle force to inflict damage, like a dagger, an axe, a spear that are thrown, right? Get half the damage bonus. That's pretty standard. But weapons that are launched, bows, crossbows, don't. Actually went through a phase. So I've got this book on bows and crossbows where they're talking about the different poundages and you've got draw length and that kind of stuff. And I had figured out a calculation based upon the amount of poundage and the draw length, how much damage it would do, right? Or how much damage bonus you get, right? Because I've been watching this guy on YouTube who's got a history thing, and he experiment by recreation, right? And he's got buddies who make um, um, arrows. I'm supposed to say middle-aged arrows. That doesn't sound right, but arrows and what they call war bows. Long bows. We're used to talking about long, thick. You're talking 160-pound pull, right? You see these guys, and if you want to do the research, they talk about the skeletal malformations on guys because of they're twisting their back and their spine and their shoulder, and what that does to the body to shoot these bows, these huge heavy bows, right? So I've got some opinion on some of these things. Oh, just concerned about what do we call exotic, right? A longbow would be exotic to me, according to this. And then they talk about here that's someplace in the West. Um, but a horse bow versus a composite bow, that kind of threw me. Trying to think about my Egyptian, um, but they're not really mounted on a horse; they're in a chariot. But I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that yet. And then of course crossbows, all dwarven gifts, right? So there aren't a lot of crossbows around. And then the stupid pistol crossbow that just irks me. How much strength can you pull? How much poundage can you pull? That 12-inch, well, let me be short, 6-inch draw length. That's going to do nothing. No damage whatsoever, really. Uh, but here they have it, just 2 points less than a light crossbow, which you're using your foot in a stirrup and both arms and your back and legs to pull to cock. I digress. Okay. You're not trained to parry with a bow. When you're trained to shoot a bow, you're not parry trained with it. But if you're going to parry with it, it's used like a quarterstaff. Um, or a melee weapon with an equivalent shape. I don't know many melee weapons that are shaped like a T. Okay, ranges. Okay, So the effective range, that's your skill. If you go half again that range, that's medium range, that's half your skill. If you go half again that range, that's long range, that's a fourth your skill. Good to go. No issues there. All crossbows are gifts from dwarfs, and elves grow their own bows from special seeds. Arbalest, dwarf gift. Elf bow. Only the elf who planted the seed can use the bow. To another member of the Aldriami cult who uses it, the bow is treated as a self bow. So I guess a elf bow does more damage than self bow, and it does. So Aldriami, the elf who grew the bow, gets the full strength. Any other Aldriami cultist can use the bow, but it has less damage. A non-Aldriami that tries to use the elf bow causes it to wither and die. And then there's a comment here about sometimes the elf bow is used by rune priests and lords of the cult to house their allied spirit. I thought elf bows had spirits, that they were alive. And looked it up. Sure enough, it is alive. It takes a heal spell, not a repair spell, to repair it. It has a power of 2d6 plus 2. So what do you get by putting your ally spirit into an elf bow that already has power in it? Do both powers stay in? Because the allied spirit's got power and charisma because it can hold spells. May have intelligence. I don't remember. I should look that up too, right? So what's the benefit? I mean, because it seems to me that if you put an ally spirit into an elf bow, it's like a possession thing. The elf bow power is no longer accessible. Now, is your allied spirit have more power than the elf bow power? Maybe, in which case that would make a little bit of sense, I guess. But I just don't know. I'd rather have a set of laurel leaves around my head, so I can tap into both sets of power. More magic points, right? Um, but if they were trying with this comment to simulate the fact that they no longer have power, and so the elf bows with power is actually allied spirits, there may be some confusion here. Longbow, Rathori Infernella. Off the west. Good to go. Self bow is nearly useless for mounted archery due to its length, and therefore a horse bow, which is shorter, does less damage. We're talking about a d6 plus 1 for a short bow. That gets stopped by almost all armor. It's not really that effective. And so a horse bow, which only does a d6, is never going to get through plate unless you impale. I don't know. Repeating crossbow. Self-destructs in the hands of non-Mostali. Good to go. And it holds 5 rounds. Fires once per round until the 5-round magazine is empty. I love that one. I like it. Good to go. Again, dwarvish. Doesn't say here. It says special Mostali weapon. Quivers. And talk about quivers. Small, medium, and large. A dozen, 2 dozen, or 40. It talks about worn slung low on the hip, at the waist, or over the back. How long is your arrow? What kind of length do you have to get something out of a quiver, unless your quiver's hanging halfway down your back, in which case can you actually reach it? I don't think anybody actually uses a quiver over their back effectively. And then, of course, they have covers. Ammunition. Some sling bullets have holes drilled in them to make whistling noises while in flight to intimidate enemies. Cool. What's the actual effect? Do you have to make an intimidation roll? Is it like a debuffed demoralize? Do they make power versus power rolls, or is it just like, is there some kind of morale roll that needs to be made? Other ammunition, alchemical, so poisons and concoctions, barbed bolts and arrows that do impaling damage, do extra damage when you remove them, another D4. And I thought somewhere that there was something about when you remove an impaling weapon, it does damage anyway because you're pulling it back out or you're pushing it the rest of the way through or something, right? But I looked in the stuff and nowhere does it discuss that. Talking about impaling weapons and there's the opportunity you have and what it takes to actually pull it out yourself or the other person. Blunt arrows do half damage and do not impale. Pitched cover, arrows and bolts. They're wrapped in cloth, soaked in pitch, lit on fire, right? Here's your flaming arrows. Anyone hit with one must spend their next round removing the arrow and the pitch, or they catch fire. Damage from the fire is to the hit location, ignores armor, and does an additional point of damage every round. So every round that it's on fire does a point of damage, but it ignores armor. I haven't done this, but I need to double check that with other fire type damage, like a fire elemental does that. Skip armor? I think it actually does. Flaming weapons. Do flame weapons skip armor? I don't think so. I'll look that up. Okay, target arrows do half damage, but they can impale. Okay, javelin, spears, and darts. Atlatl, the spear thrower, or the javelin thrower, right? It's slower, but it gives you more force. You have greater range and do additional damage. Darts, they're like, this long kind of thing. You can clip some inside your large shield. I think that from some kind of Greco-Roman thing. For convenience, right there. Slings, they're considered thrown weapons, so they apply half the wielder's damage bonus, if any. Minimum range for a sling is 5 meters. Minimum range for a staff sling is 10 meters. So these are designed to go out there, right? Thrown weapons, again, apply half the wielder's damage bonus. Throwing axe, a one-handed, single-bladed axe is balanced for throwing. Does less damage. It's got throwing range. Does that mean you cannot throw a small axe or a hatchet? I'm not sure. Or is there a modifier for when you do that? I guess half the weapon skill, maybe? Hey, from the other thing we're talking about using in the same category. That's an idea. Okay. Hunting boomerangs. Again, boomerangs, exotic weapons. Return to the wielder. I'm kind of thinking that actual hunting boomerangs don't. They're designed to fly, but I could be wrong. And you need seed in your boomerang skill roll in order to catch it. War boomerangs, same thing. It can also be used as a club. Darts, those little dart things I was talking about before, if they're thrown in an arc, you don't get a damage bonus. But what if you really huck it and use all your force throw up, because it's going to land at the same speed it left? Now, flexible weapons, entangle, and special success. Throwing nets are small. Okay, last section, war gear, and we are almost at the miss. Did not take quite as long as I thought it would. Okay, so banners and pennants. Regiments use banners and pennants sometimes to house their regimental whiter. Good to go. I think we need some more rules on whiters because I'm really confused on that still. Caltrops. Yeah, caltrops, nasty, right? You throw them out there, one, whatever it is, one dose covers 5 square meters. Okay, so if you're moving more than at a walking speed, you don't see what that is. To me, that's 3 meters per round, or maybe 1 meter per movement space. So it would be 8 meters per round. You must succeed at a dodge roll, or you take a D4 damage to a random hit location. Soft-soled shoes and boots have 1 armor point, while stiff-soled sandals and boots provide 2 points of protection. If you're wearing boots or shoes or sandals outside, they should have shoe leather or stiff soles just by definition. Now there are soft-soled slippers and stuff. You wear those inside, that kind of thing, around the house, maybe in the neighborhood kind of deal. I got a pair of those too. If a creature's running on like a horse, their natural armor protects, but only at half that value. So if they're 2 points skin, and only 1 point subtract. Okay. Metal ground spikes. You can actually make these out of wood, but they do less damage. These are pounded into the ground so they can't be blown away with elementals and such, right? Same thing. If you're going more than a walking speed, you must dodge, or you take a D2 damage instead of a D4, so they're less damaging. Not exactly sure why. Maybe it's because if you step on one, it actually bends over as it goes down, whereas caltrops don't. It says roll a D8 for humanoids. But we did not say that here under caltrops. It was just determine random hit location. Consistency. At best, most footwear provides between 1 and 3 points of armor. Where did this 3 point armor footwear come from? And why is it not in the other paragraph? Though magical protection applies. Again, good to know. It wasn't discussed previously in the other exact same situation. A vexilla is the standard of a lunar unit composed of troops from different regiments. This innovation allows troops that worship different gods in order to work together and obey a senior official. That's cool. Warpack. The lunar army uses a pack system consisting of 2 cross poles and a section of tarp lashed together to form a pack that carries the soldier's personal gear. Nice to know. Happy gaming.